Hello and welcome back to the Bookshelf Odyssey podcast. My guest today is Tracee Garner, and she is an international best-selling author of 18 books, as well as a speaker, a writing coach, and dynamic course creator. She writes fiction and nonfiction depicting African Americans triumphing over adversity and meeting success, whether that be in love or life pursuits. Tracee loves public speaking, teaching workshops, and talking about her craft at every opportunity. So I'm joined today with the very talented and wonderful Tracee Garner. Welcome to the Bookshelf Odyssey podcast.
Thank you, Art. I am so happy to be here. I appreciate your having me.
Yeah. I wanted to talk to you today about your book in your life, but especially your book, Disability, an Anecdotal Field Guide for the Rest of Us. And we'll talk a little bit about that and your life and journey to becoming published. But to start things off, I like to ask, are you a big reader at all? And what's your favorite book?
Yeah, I'm a huge reader. I love to read. In the pandemic, I did get away from it a little bit, but then, I tried to return to audiobooks. For some reason, I couldn't listen to fiction on audio, but I love nonfiction on audio. But recently, I actually listened to Serafina Nova Glass. It's called On a Quiet Street or A Quiet Lane. It was performed really, really good. It's not my favorite book, but I loved it as far as the audio performance. But my favorite book is actually Write It Down, Make It Happen by Henriette Klausner. She just is a wonderful author. She's written several different books. But Write It Down, Make It Happen is like a book I try to read almost like every year, just even if I just read a couple passages of it. But it just, I'm a big proponent of writing things down and then seeing about, making them happen. So that's like one of my favorite books to read.
And there's almost something therapeutic about just getting your thoughts down on paper. You can, I don't know if it helps clarify your head or what, but I find that to be very helpful.
It is. It's definitely like a purging and emptying, definitely like a clearing of the cobwebs and the clutter. But it really frees you. I think it frees your brain and your heart to consider other things, to think and to hold other stuff. And I think, I feel terrible for people who don't. I'm sure there's some other ways that they can empty themselves and get things out of their head and heart. But I think that writing would solve a lot of communication problems and a lot of, violence and things. I think writing is so much more than people realize. The people that do it know, but the people that don't, I feel like they're almost stuffed with just everything that they just can't get out and express themselves in some form.
Now, and I actually just read On a Quiet Street. Was that the name of the book you just mentioned? Yeah. I thought, that author sounded familiar. And then, I read that. I did the audiobook too. Yeah.
It was so really
great. Just picking up, you had said about writing and it can help even solve trouble and even maybe violence and things. I've just read a book I've talked about on my YouTube channel. It was called 1,000 Nights, and now the author's name is slipping, but I'll make sure to put it below. But she was it's a fictional story, but but the author was a soldier in Afghanistan, and she writes the story of a soldier who's in Afghanistan who is half Afghani and half American, and she gets captured. And it's kind of a retelling of 1,001 Nights where, she tells a story every night. So she's telling a story every night to her captor who wants to turn her over to the Taliban. And basically she's telling them stories of their culture that she had gathered while she was patrolling the streets and getting to know the people. And the author said that she based this book on real life events that happened to her, just collecting the stories and things. And just that power of the story and the power of the written word really comes through in the end and saves the day. And the book doesn't go where you think it's going to go. It's a really beautiful, beautiful book.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah. I'll I'll email you the author's name if you can't
Okay.
find it. But yeah, it was one of my favorites. And although sometimes my brain gets it's like a sieve. Sometimes that things kind of
Mhm.
slip out.
I think that happens to everybody. Things that I read kind of run together. Like I'll string the stories together in one book and it'll be like five different books that I've read. And you just kind of, and that happens a lot with Bible reading too. It's kind of
Hmm.
like, oh, did whatever happened over here? No, that's in the new version. But what I was going to say about the captive
Hmm.
person, the character, storytelling probably won her captors, like won him over,
Hmm.
like compelled him to identify and to find commonalities with her, which, I don't know if she was, eventually let go, but I'm sure that something she said and the stories that she told kind of changed his mind, maybe about her and about,
Hmm.
motives and reasoning and everything. So I think that, that is a big thing. Storytelling can compel others to root for you and
Hmm.
to believe in you and help you, and
Hmm.
that's really important too.
Yeah, it's I really wish more people knew about that book. It because she finds out more about the Afghani people, and that it's not that their situation was very, very complicated, and
Hmm.
she began to understand him and his family as people and not just an object of war. And then they began to open up to her and understand her as an American, and that there's more to Americans than just being a soldier. And just a beautiful book that kindness wins in the end, and I love it.
Right.
um,
That's great.
One of
It's
the
a good
best books I've
message.
read. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, let's talk about you now. We've got our TBRs all full and ready to go now. But
Yes. Ever
uh,
growing TBR.
that's right. Yep. That's partly why I started the podcast, is to find some good books to read. So you've written, it says 18 books. What
Yes.
kind of books do you write?
So I first started writing romantic fiction, romantic
Mhm.
suspense, and I still write that. I love that. That's where my heart is. And about more than half of the 18 are fiction, romantic suspense. But I do write some nonfiction. I've written an inspirational self-help book, actually two now, and I wrote a publishing guide for people who want to publish their book. It's like a workbook. I'm like a workbook addict. If you have paper and handouts, any workshop I go to, like we are like best friends. But so yeah, and this recent book, the nonfiction, the disability guide, is book 18 that I've written, and I just wanted to, tell about my experience as a disabled woman who uses a wheelchair for most of like all day. And I was diagnosed at 2 years old with muscular dystrophy. So it's a neuromuscular disease that makes your muscles weaker over time. So I got my first wheelchair in elementary school way back when, 10 years ago. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. That was just yesterday, I swear.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, but almost 40 plus years using a wheelchair,
Mhm.
to get around and for my mobility.
Have you always wanted to be a writer, and how did you pursue that?
Yeah, actually, no, I didn't. I knew I could write. I believed that I could write pretty good, but
Mhm.
professional publishing is totally a different ballgame. I've written in newsletters. I've written in my campus literary magazine, yearbook club, and all that kind of stuff. But in college, when I was having such a hard time with my academics, I really drew into myself, drew away from my math class, and kind of escaped on paper to these stories that I would create during math time and in the computer lab back before everybody had computers. We had a computer lab which you could
Mhm.
go and use if you didn't have one at home and just to do your papers. I would print out pages and pages of my book and edit it, and I submitted it to a contest and I won that contest, and that really started me on my journey of winning the contest. Getting a book deal, publication of the book was also part of the conditions of winning the contest. I got a trip to New York, and I got a $500 advance, which was a lot back then to a 20-something-year-old. And so that just kind of changed things. And now I just can't imagine not writing. Um, I love it so much, but it was really that unconventional way of entering. And that's why I always tell people there's so many writing contests out there, even today, that people could win. They have monetary advances. You can get honorable mentions. It really is a great way, especially when you have to meet an editor and a publisher. It can be kind of intimidating.
Mm.
And so a contest is really a way for you. And I feel like the other reason that the contest was for me is that they never had to see my disability. Like my writing was the thing that had to stand alone, and they didn't have any other factors in which to judge me. So, like I always think about that too. Like, wow, that was such a great way for me to really show my talent without the bias of, well, you have a disability. What can you really do? Can you really like write? Are you going to be able to write more books? Or are you able to articulate? The writing could speak for me all by itself. And it did, and it won. And I was so excited.
I have a friend who won a pretty big writing
Hmm.
contest and got his book published. And he was just on cloud nine for months after that, I think.
I
Probably
still
still is
am.
a little bit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
my win was 20 something years ago. And I'm still talking about it. It was just
Mhm.
so it came at a time when I was really depressed and I was really having a hard time with my school work. I used to cry after math because it was just so hard. I just could not understand. And people think, oh, math is not a big deal. But if you're trying to pass and you're trying to like graduating
Mhm.
means you'll be successful. It used to anyway, that you'll get a good job and that you won't be kind of freeloading off your parents for the rest of your life. And that is what kind of propelled me to enter. It's like I gotta have something else. I needed some other purpose in case my academics didn't in case I wasn't able to complete them without failing and getting kicked out, because I had actually already been placed on academic probation at a larger school. And then we moved, and my dad was like, go to community college. And I was like, I don't want to go there, But I love community college. I'm actually such a fan of smaller schools. And I feel like people sometimes really care as opposed to, I went to George Mason first right out of high school. And it's such a big school. My first class had like 300 people in it.
Mhm.
And, the campus was at that time largely inaccessible. I actually broke the axle of my wheelchair on one of their
Mhm.
inaccessible grounds trying to get from one end of the campus to the other. And so, and I got placed on academic probation, like I said, which means a year off because you fail one class. And so having that, in the back of my head, that you're not going to make this school thing. You might as well get a job. And then you have a disability, which also makes it harder because employers are still, kind of set in their ways as far as hiring you. So
Mhm.
all of that kind of weighed on me, and in the contest was just a neon sign in a dark place to get me to the next level. And my grades actually improved after I won. I felt validated about something, and all my
Mhm.
grades, the better I was able to. I mean, I got a tutor, of course, like two tutors for math, but the rest I was just buoyed by the win and still being in college, and being able to tell professors my book is coming out. Do you have a book out? I would never say that, but they
No,
thinking
yeah,
that
yeah,
in my brain, while
yeah.
they're like grading me with, with all this red ink and like, I'm going to be published, and it was just such a game changer for me.
Mm. Yeah, just a boost to your self confidence. To say, "Hey, I
Mhm.
can do this,"
Right. Right.
and then you can see where that path takes you.
Hmm.
Um, and then you had told me that October is National Disability Month,
Yes.
which I'm ashamed to say I didn't even realize. So I do want to thank you that you made that me aware of it. What can we do uh, to be a part of that to help raise awareness?
Hmm. Well, there's so much, I mean, and there are so many things. I don't want to omit the fact that it's also Cancer Awareness Month, Breast
Mhm.
Cancer Month. I think it's even domestic violence and other types of things, although that might be in February because I've actually written about that in one of my books. But what people can do is to really highlight and spotlight voices, and you can do that anytime. It doesn't just have to be during that month, but bringing attention and awareness to the plight of people with disabilities. Some of the struggles that are still going on include, like, substantial gainful activity. That's a Social Security term of good employment, competitive employment, and kind of the deficits that exist around those for people with disabilities, lack of appropriate and affordable health care, and getting different health care screenings. I mean, there's a couple of things that I champion, but there is no there is no subject that isn't at some kind of deficit, as far as what we do. Changing, people in a position to hire, changing their minds about the capabilities and the contributions people with disabilities can make when given the opportunity and the supports. I see a lot of people who actually become disabled later in life, and it's all of a sudden we think that they can't do anything, that they can't do their job the same, that they don't have the stamina and the energy. And then, employers are not willing to make accommodations, which they have tax incentives and money for to do. If somebody requests an ergonomic chair, it's all, or a footrest, most accommodations cost less than $500. And there is often funds in the budget, or you can apply for them to get the things that people need. And those things, would enable them to continue working, continue, making a living, and get to their pension or get to their retirement at full retirement benefits, as opposed to taking disability early, which, brings that monthly dollar amount down. So it's just those little things about retention and more hiring and people opening their minds to accept people in whatever form they are, that we can all think about and bring awareness to.
Yeah, do you think it's maybe a lot of like employers and people are more? It's more of, well, we don't want to bother going through all these extra steps just to hire someone. We just need to get somebody in here to do the work. And
Right.
I could see it as being it's just too many extra steps. Let's just hire somebody else.
Yeah. It's really not, though. I mean, it's
Yeah.
not any more steps than hiring anybody else. And the other thing is that people with disabilities already know what their capabilities are.
Mm-hmm.
So they're the ones who are really tasked with figuring out, how best to help me. They're not often, we are not going to go to you with, I need all of these things, here, fix it. We're going to really work with you because we should know. Most people, having lived with it for, however long they've been with it, understand what the needs are and where to get them. And so I think that there can be just a laziness on behalf of someone to who thinks that there's so much more to do. There really isn't more, and there isn't any person with a disability that I've met who isn't willing to help fix their own problem. At the end of the day, my disability is my issue. So I should be coming to you as an employer with a doable solution already. I probably already know it, but you're making it, as an employer who's unaware, you may be internally making it worse than it really has to be, and that's just your lack of awareness, or maybe you just don't want to. It's really not any more quote unquote work for me to be higher than it is for my colleague, and then look to us for the solutions. And I would also say to people with disabilities, go to the person with the solutions and not with the problems only. So I think it's a partnership, and we have to work together to solve problems.
I like that, working together. Yeah. I've heard a lot of discussion recently about, giving everybody the same chance to succeed.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like maybe that's where this is at, is that not to get too political here, but I've had lots of opportunities that maybe not everybody would be given, just because, I'm a white male, and those opportunities just tend to be there than others don't have. And I've been really just seeing a lot of discussion around that how can we help or make sure everyone is getting the same fair treatment, and that can have such a powerful effect. Because I realized, what if I had been treated or dealt with like something less than or an
Yeah.
other. And my life was hard enough as it was. I don't want
Right.
to that would add to it. I don't know. There's just been a lot of discussion on that lately, and I think that's good. Hopefully, we're coming close to making some positive change in our culture on that.
Yeah, I'm pretty optimistic. I mean, every day we get a little bit closer, but of course, we also do things that set us back. I think, when we have an awareness and sometimes we think that we've solved every issue of the inequities that we face. What I would say is that the biggest thing I think sometimes people don't do is they see something but they don't say anything. Like I live near DC, and there was that big thing after 9/11. If you see something, say something.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that more people in a position of power could do that, because if they see something, they should say something about it. And even if it's very subtle, because the other thing that happens is that your unawareness or your refusal to acknowledge that there is a problem just perpetuates, and the problem gets bigger and bigger. But if you say something, even behind closed doors, you don't have to embarrass anyone. But let's say you see a colleague, say something to someone, and they wouldn't have said it to you, or they wouldn't have said it to, other colleagues of different skin tones. And you could say, I think you should reconsider that, because I think you're using a frame of reference that is not the same, is erroneous, and is based on stereotypes. So, and they would respect you. Like they already have more respect for you sometimes than they do for the person that they've belittled or reprimanded, unfairly, or treated unfairly, or had prejudicial practices against. But coming from you, you can be an ally by speaking up and saying, I think that was, and they would take it so much better from you, which is sad, because they see you as an equal, and when they don't see other people that way.
Mm. Well, yeah. Well, you're giving me so much to think about. Thank you. No, thank you so much. Well, and I appreciate your thoughts. I know that can
And
be
it's
kind of a
hard. Yeah,
touchy
it's
subject.
hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And you have to think about, are you willing? Because that's your own, issue to deal with. It's going to cost you something,
Mm.
maybe. Your estimation in that person's eyes may go up or down. And
Mm-hmm.
you have to ask yourself, or is that worth it to you? If you
Mm-hmm.
don't care, go for it. Say something, be an ally, and then you can come to the cookout. But, if not, keep going, to that side, whereas you want to be, and is it truthful? But a lot of people don't get involved in things because either their estimation of themselves, perception will be perceived by others, and they don't like that, and that's uncomfortable. Or if
Mm-hmm.
you're confident enough in yourself, it really is a confidence question. At the end of the day, how confident are you to speak up for other people? And if you're not, that's fine. Maybe you can grow to that eventually. But if you're not at that place right now, that's going to take a little bit of work to do and to change.
I think being aware of it is that first step. A couple of years ago, I would have said, well, for instance, I'm not a racist,
Mhm.
but have I been in the presence of racist jokes and not said anything?
Right.
Sometimes that complicit by silence thing
Hmm.
is
Hmm.
the area that I'm really starting to think through in my own life. So
Right.
yeah, well, we're covering all kinds of topics here. So no,
And
thank
that
you.
doesn't, and it goes both
Yeah.
ways. I've been in the
Mm-hmm.
presence where somebody might have said something about other people with disabilities that
Mm-hmm.
was inappropriate, and you just, but the thing you could do too is practice. You need to develop your own repertoire of what are you going to say, so
Mm-hmm.
that you're ready. There's nothing wrong with practicing, writing down some bullet points, and finding ways that you're going to respond, and just, you almost have to like arm yourself. It's going to happen. What are you going
Mm-hmm.
to do? So you really need to. There's nothing wrong with practicing.
Mm-hmm. And then in the end, then if we can carry on those civil discussions,
Hmm.
that we could really begin to see some genuine change.
Right. Right.
We're not just screaming at each other, but we're talking and we're communicating and
Mm-hmm.
um, understanding different perspectives than yours and or than mine, you know, and I think that's where we can really see the change that's needed um,
Mm-hmm.
to just to understand the other person better.
Right,
Uh,
right. And the change doesn't have to be, sometimes I get annoyed if I'm just advocating in my little community, but
mhm,
that's okay. That's where I am right now. That's where the opportunity exists. You don't have to do some national campaign in order to be effective. You can really do it in your own circles.
mhm. Yeah, and you never know who you can impact by helping one person
Right.
or communicating with one person, and then it's like a ripple effect. I know that probably sounds like a cliche, but there's a lot of truth in that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to also just make sure we have a little bit of time to talk about your book,
Hmm.
Disability, an Anecdotal Field Guide for the rest of us.
It's a mouthful.
It is, yeah. What is that book about? What can we expect when we read it?
Yeah, so the book is really, I've taken 9 topics around disability issues that I've faced. So, employment, I talk about, what worked for me to get a job, I've been a case manager for the last 13 years. I've been gainfully employed since I was 16 and doing different jobs and always, getting the job is the biggest thing. But I talk about what worked for me, how are you going to get these jobs, what programs you should participate in. There's vocational rehabilitation programs that you can use that can support you, job coaching, job shadowing. So in each chapter, 9 different chapters, I'm talking about this is the story, of a lovely lady. But I'm just kidding. This is the story that sounded so Brady Bunch for a minute, but this is my story that I talk about. Like, this is what happened to me. This is how I got through it. And then at the end of each chapter are take action tips about what you can do. And the most important thing to me is that I've also written the book for parents of children with disabilities because I've already lived that experience. So I took the cliff notes for them. Like, that's the motto for the book, is that I lived the experience. I met these hurdles and barriers. Now I'm going to tell you how to avoid the same pitfalls that I came over. So emergency preparedness, not just a natural disaster emergency, but what are you going to do if you have a caregiver that comes and assists you every day? They don't come and your primary caregiver or your backup is also ill. So my backup is my mom. What happens if she's ill and the caregiver is not coming for the day? Like, you need to be prepared as a person with a disability to make contingency plans. I have other caregiver agencies on speed dial that I'll use and say, hey, can you send somebody out? People don't realize that, I can't get out of bed without assistance. So if nobody's coming to assist me, then, I'm kind of screwed and I need
Mm,
to figure out. So my plans have contingency plans and plan A, B, C, D, E, and F, so I'm just talking about those different things in the book. Transportation, I had to work really hard to drive my accessible vehicle. The state paid for some of it, but I got denied about 7 times before I got granted. Whereas, talking about prejudice, my white friend brought his van by me with his vocational rehabilitation counselor and therapist. And he was like, hey, look at my van, look at me. And I was just like, why am I not, meeting the same success
mm,
getting my driving? And that's because of my case manager at the time. So I talk about that. You can get a new case manager. You can move on from that person. You don't have to take what they say as golden. But a lot of times we're afraid. You can fire your doctor,
mhm.
but we just keep them forever. It's like they're not doing you any good. Half the time they don't remember what they prescribed to you and they want to give you something that you are not supposed to be taking at all. And they're working with 500, different people. So
Yeah.
it's really kind of a permission slip to challenge the things that you experience and to make them better and to also find out what Tracee did. Like, I really wanted to be a book of reference. I'm having a problem with transportation, or I don't know what to do in an emergency. How can I make my child safe? What is my child going to encounter as an adult with disabilities? Like, read the book that Tracee wrote and say, oh, okay, now I got it. So I feel I almost want it to be like a yellow pages. Like, you go through it and you
Hmm.
see what I did, and then you adapt whatever you can. It's not going to be the same, but it's going to be, you can still use some of the tools that I used to tackle your own hurdles and your own barriers in your life.
Mm. So the intended audience for this would be somebody with a disability or a chronic illness.
It could be self advocates, I say, and also parents of people with
Mm.
disabilities. But honestly, somebody like you, let's say you know a family, a single mom,
Mhm.
and they don't have to be single, but you know a family that has a new diagnosis. I encourage other people to read it because they're like, I'm dealing with this kid who just got really recently diagnosed with something. Could you just read it and tell me what to do? Like, I feel like that could also be,
Mhm.
talk about being an ally and being helpful. Why don't other people read it and look through it and get the tools and say, look, I read about this thing and here's a number for you to call. Instead of
Mhm.
like giving the book to the person, they have no time and they're
Right.
already overwhelmed with everything. There are Facebook groups that people tell me all the time, I don't like Facebook, I can't stand it. And I'm like, Facebook is a gold mine for support groups
Yep.
for people who have what you have. And I don't care. You don't like the privacy. You don't like Mr. Zuckerberg, what have you, but get in there and use what Mr. Zuckerberg created, which is he has a platform for groups to get on, share knowledge, share resources, and better themselves. So, however you feel about these social media platforms, that is irrelevant. If it has the
Mhm.
data you need, if it has the info, a colleague of mine went on to find her daughter was only one of 100 people that had this disease that she has. And nobody knew, everybody got diagnosed wrong. So she went on Facebook and there was a small little group of parents and the kids with that same type of disabilities, a gold mine of information. And there are other groups that I talk about. There's a chapter organization for almost every disability in the world, and
Mhm.
there's a local chapter. If there's not a local chapter, you can start one, or you can find the National Association who probably has a mailing list of people in your area, and you can get them to send out something saying, I'd like to start this group. We need resources. We need to advocate. There's a bill, in the docket that's going to pass legislation. This would really hurt our children with this type of disabilities. Let's get together. Let's go down there, give public testimony, write letters. Like, this is what we can do to create change. So social media can be a really great tool to cure or at least help mitigate fallout around things that are hurtful and that are
Mhm.
hard. And so people are sharing, and that's all I wanted to do with the book, which I hopefully, eventually in another year or two, I will put all online, and hopefully it'll be kind of a searchable thing. And I'm actually in the next book, and that's why it's volume one, because in the next
Mhm.
volumes I want other people to share their same experience and tell how they manage to deal with it.
Mhm.
So it's a lot.
Yeah. No, it sounds like a kind of your life project almost.
It is, yes. Well, I've
uh,
lived it. So,
yeah.
that was a project in itself. And now I'm telling you, about how I did.
What tips would you have or words of encouragement to maybe a family, maybe a child has been diagnosed with a chronic illness or a disability, or maybe they themselves are facing a new
Mhm.
territory, and they don't know how to deal. What would your
Yeah.
words of encouragement be to them, or
My
some tips
first
for them?
words, yeah, would just be that there's hope. You're not the first person and you won't be the last person diagnosed with something seemingly devastating. And I say seemingly because, doctors, first of all, doctors are practicing. Like I always tell people, they have a practice. They're really practicing on all of
Yeah.
us and hopefully getting it right on some of us and maybe missing on others. And some people are dying,
Uh-huh.
so they didn't do too well. They didn't practice very well on that person. My point is that doctors have very dismal outlooks when they give you diagnoses. And yet there's 1,000 people that are thriving with the same diagnosis. The doctors, to me, they don't go out and find the success stories and then bring them back to the family. Like, here, talk to this person and talk to that person. What you really need to get out after you hear the diagnosis, just keep the diagnosis and forget everything else. The diagnosis is what you need to be able to do your research. But all that doom and gloom that the doctor is projecting on you, that is the worst thing. You just leave I'm surprised at outside of a hospital, there isn't a cliff. Just put a cliff outside every hospital because I'll get the bad news and I'll just
Yeah.
want to jump off. And so I think that people really need to take a minute to step back, and they can really really find ways to deal with whatever news they received. That's the most important
Mhm.
thing. Take a step back after a new diagnosis, get yourself together. You can have a cry if you want to. I'm a fan of crying. I feel so much better after a good cry. It's a
Yeah.
release, also like the
Yeah.
writing. But then get the tools and get the things you need. Don't just sit there and think this is the end, this is the worst thing. Um, you really can change your entire outlook on something. I never saw any different reaction to my parents I don't even know when they found out that I had muscular dystrophy. I was 2 years old. I was trying to walk and I broke my
Mhm.
leg. I just fell down a
Mm.
lot. And they were like, oh, something's wrong here. Let's
Mhm.
go to the doctor. But I never remember them having this big, oh my God, my child, I just never ever felt
Mhm.
that from them. They were always optimistic. And I guess if they did have it, they didn't let me see it. And your children don't need to see that because they're going to internalize that, wow, I'm going to die tomorrow, mom, what's happening. So I just think that
Right.
parents can really be the indicator of how your child is going to perceive themselves long term. And how you handle it is
Mhm.
how they're going to handle it. And I wish more parents,
Mm.
realize that. I mean, you'll see
Mhm.
all the time, children acting if you have a tantrum about something as an adult, your child has the same kind of reaction to everything. It's hilarious. You just see little
Uh-huh.
mini people walking around like, wow, that's your child. Totally.
Yep. Yep. My wife and I have always said, I wish our kids would copy our good habits and not our bad ones, but they tend to,
Yes.
focus in on those. Yeah. Uh,
Yeah.
well, and then, I'm just thinking through too, about what you said that, parents or caregivers to people, uh, people with disabilities, they have a hard job too. And like you
Mhm.
said, sometimes they have to have that positive front.
Mhm.
What can we do to help those who are caregiving?
Yeah, take the child for a little while. I mean, I know it's a big ask, but what I
Mm-hmm.
see because I'm a case manager and I work with people with disabilities every single day. What I see is that as a child gets older, they are afraid, depending on the type of disability they have. The parent is afraid of letting them be with other people but the parent has to realize, and most don't until it happens, that they're going to age, they're going to die, and little Johnny and Susie is still going to be here. And little Johnny and Susie's ability to be with other people, can you take them to the movie? Can you take them out for a few hours? Will help build resilience in them and let them get along with other people who aren't mommy and daddy. So we have a big another type of pandemic is the housing crisis. Nobody knows how to be a really good roommate because mom and dad cater to them all the time. So mom and dad need to
Yeah.
let you go with other people, capable people, people you trust, not some, random stranger who's,
Right.
but like a neighbor
Right.
or a friend or an uncle, or an aunt. Uncle Art will take you out for a few hours and give me a break. Give me a break from
Mm-hmm.
constantly worrying. You could learn, ways that if people have behavioral issues, you could learn to deal with that. and take that child with you. Me and my mom both have babysat someone with Down syndrome so the couple could go out on a date. And that was just somebody that I met at when I was like 20 something. I worked at a daycare center. And so her daughter had Down syndrome, and she threw things in our house, but it's like, it's okay. Next time she comes over, move that stuff. Like it doesn't have to be this thing where you can never help again. And that also goes to parents, that you have to let your child go be with other people and build their ability to cope without you, because that's a problem too. And isolation, particularly for people with autism and other kinds of disabilities where they lack social cues, to me comes from, sometimes not being out among other people, parents keeping their children at home and not letting them go to social hour or to go to a sleepover, or teaching them and talking to them about, this is how you act. And if you act a certain way, then you can't go anymore. But if you act this way, and, it's baby steps, but there's no reason you can't, help someone after school, watch them, take them to a ball game, to alleviate that parent. That's another way to be an ally too.
So just be willing to help out and to, just to come alongside of them and be a partner or a friend, stepping in where they might need some help. Yeah.
Right. And I will also say, if you have children of your own that are in that age bracket, that's who they really want to hang out with, but they never can because they feel socially awkward, but all of you guys could go, and see whatever that you guys like to do, a car show, you can really help out the parent, and the parent has to be willing to let go too. It goes both ways. You might be totally helpful, but if the parent is not willing and they're afraid, then that's also a problem too.
Oh, yeah. Well, Tracee, I feel like I could just talk to you all day, but we do gotta wrap this up here. But I just want to thank you again for coming on, for sharing from your wisdom and life experience.
Thank you.
As we talk about a subject that, a couple of subjects really that can be kind of hard to talk about, but I think they're conversations worth having. You had told me you've got some free books you're willing to hand out here. Tell me about them.
Yes. So Anecdotal Disability and Anecdotal Field Guide for the Rest of Us will be free probably through November, the middle of November from now. When we're taking this in September, but it'll be free all the way till mid-November. So anyone can use the link, which we'll put in the description, and download it. And also one of my fiction books is also free. It's first in the series, and you'll just sign up for the links that we'll leave, and you can get 2 free books if you'd like to read them.
All right. Well, I'd highly recommend you do that if you're interested in this subject. Tracee, again, I just want to thank you for coming on. And what's next for you on your journey?
Yeah, well, I want to continue. What's next, like far away, but hopefully one of these days is a Lifetime movie, one of my books. So I put that in the ether. But I have the 4th book in the series that I just finished, and it's with the editor. It'll be out in November. And I have a nonfiction book called Author Life Fix that'll be out in January. So I will continue writing. I will continue on my journey. I love it. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to share with others.
Yeah, well, thank you again. And folks want to find you online, what's your website?
Yeah, TraceeGarner.com. Tracee, my first name, Tracee, Garner, GARNER.com. I am there. You can use the contact me button and send me a little note. Email, I always respond. And I'd love to connect with people, but I'm on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook too.
Yep. Using those social medias for good. So
definitely.
I'm a big fan of that. So they can be a poison tool, but they can also be a powerful tool for good. So,
yes.
So thank you.
Sure.
And you're welcome back. Anytime you need to promote something, just give me a heads up.
Appreciate that.
Tracee, thank you. And we'll talk to you later.
Okay. Bye.